Hello, everybody. We are on our sixth week art and talk session. Thank you for swinging by. We're just going to bust this out. Today doesn't really have a topic. We're just going to be talking about some of the stuff going on in the world today, robotics, history. Maybe we'll throw a little Tartaria in there and, just kind of be rambling about stuff. So, may the games begin. Let me adjust my lighting here a little bit. So, yeah. Yeah, no. This is going to be about as good as it gets, people. Got some wicked contrasts, but we'll get over that. You know, I was watching something the other day about Tartaria. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's a getting more well-known theory of the world that we know today being not exactly what it is, pretty much. You know, I know that sounds kind of vague, but basically it says that the world we know today, all the grand buildings, all the big Capitol buildings, not only in America, but all over the world, that kind of popped up in the last couple hundred years, are all because something else made them. Some other society. What society? Well, it's called Tartaria. It, existed pretty much in Central Eurasia. And that whole area went into Europe. And a lot of people think it was just everywhere. It was everywhere in the world. It was like a monotheistic, one world state thing. And there are some interesting dilemmas behind it when it comes to the buildings, right? For example, when it comes to all the old crazy looking buildings, all the state capitals in America, all of the, state capitals and federal capitals all over Europe, just all these really grand buildings. And, there are some logs of these buildings being made. There are some, stories of these buildings, but a lot of these buildings seem to be, like, how would you make that? You see some of these cathedrals in Europe that took, 600 years to make or something, and they said they made them with, chisels, hammers, and a horse and buggy, and it makes you just go, there's no possible way that's what's going on. A horse and buggy did this. It's hard to believe, Partly. I've always felt one of two ways about this whole thing. Kind of the same way I felt about the moon landing, of people just don't have faith anymore. They look at something that they don't understand or that they don't believe could be done because the radical, tools of today couldn't figure it out. And it's kind of hubris, if you ask me, a little bit, to think that people before us couldn't do it because they're not us, and we're so awesome and great. That whole camp, And for a long time, I did believe that, but then one thing keeps pulling me back, and that is that the powers that be, whoever they are, wherever they are, lie. They lied to us, and they've been caught many times in our collective past lying to us. So it makes you wonder, well, if they lied to me about all of that, why wouldn't they lie to me about something as innocuous as the whole Tartaria thing? Basically, it boils down to kind of what you believe. It's like the organic food thing. If I take a tomato from Walmart that's, big and red and lush, and that just says whatever, and I take another one that's an organic tomato, and it looks exactly the same, the only thing it boils down to is the packaging. Like if the packaging says to like, subscribe, and share. You know what I'm saying? So, that being said, it's it just boils down to what you believe. You know, do you believe that that happened? Do you believe that primitive human beings were able to, you know, chisel out some crazy thing and make it? I don't know. I don't know. I know a fair amount about history, and I've always liked history. But, you know, liking history and understanding how it came about are two different things. History is written by the people that win. You might have heard before, history is written by the victors, and it's very true. It is. So, you know, we're basically reading whatever they told us. Whatever they decided we had to know is what we're reading now. And that's kind of, you know, that basically says that you got to trust us. If you trust me, then we'll tell you the future. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think that all the World's Fairs of the last century and all these different huge events where they built these opulent towers and these huge, like basically miniature cities, and then just to knock them down a year later seems kind of wild, you know? Why would you do that? Or is it more likely that these places were found and repopulated after some kind of cataclysm? That's kind of the part of the whole Tartaria thing. You know, is that there was some kind of worldwide cataclysm that coincided with some kind of, you know, mass casualty event that led to the survivors, who would be ultimately our ancestors, moving into these areas and taking over, just moving in, you know? It all boils down to that whole, like, were they capable of doing it? Were people capable of building something of this magnitude that long ago? You know? It all boils down to what you want to believe, you know? Do I believe that the people could do it? Well, I believe that, I don't know. You know, the more I want to believe that they could do it, the more I have to believe that maybe they didn't do it. You know, it's not like it's too wild of a thing, you know? I don't know. You know, it's easy to get lost in the minutia of everything going on with that whole thing, with the whole Tartaria thing. It really is. It's easy to get lost in it. It's easy to believe, no, that's not how it was. But when in fact, we have no idea. And like I said earlier, it boils down to what you believe. I think in America, you know, there's so many people look at so many buildings today. They'll go to their small town, wherever, and they'll say, look at this enormous post office. Like, why do they need that for this little town? But they lacked doing the history of their small town, which said it was 12 times bigger when that post office was made, you know? So you got to take the good with the bad, the credible with the incredible. And sometimes, you know, people just like having a mystery, you know? And that's cool. That's what attracted me to the whole thing was, you know, what's the mystery behind it? And we all see the mystery, you know? We all just don't believe it was possible. We look at these large, heavy, ornate buildings with 3-story doors, and we wonder, were giants the people that, you know, came into these buildings and whatnot? And it is exciting to think, you know? I think so, at least. It's exciting to think, you know, maybe there was some advanced civilization here before us, and they built all this cool stuff, and then they died out for whatever reason. And now here we are, just basically living in their shadows. I always thought that was kind of an interesting thing. And you never know. Like, think about it, you know, like, think about some kind of event happening in our world today. Some kind of event that basically wiped out most of the people. Not all of them, but most of them. And, yeah, what would we do? Would we go back into the world and, you know, take over the old buildings and the old infrastructure and all that and try doing something with it? I don't think that's too wild of a possibility. I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. I think it's been done before in the world. I think it's very much been done before. So it makes you wonder, right? Can we do that again? And if it's happened once, how many times has it happened? How many times has humanity been wiped out and then restarted from the ashes of what was there before, you know? Yes. So, in my little illustration here, I'm kind of envisioning this decaying old city on the bottom here, falling apart where all the pores live, and I'm gonna have in the background behind this wall like a big phantasmical skyline for all the rich and elite people. You know, maybe they're people that after some cataclysm found this place and took it over and are rebuilding now. We'll see. Yeah, very interesting stuff. People, you should look into that. Tartaria. Very interesting stuff. Makes your brain think. Makes mine think, at least. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The world we're in is different than that one. It seems like a lot of that Tartaria stuff kind of branches off of the Victorian, you know, day and age. And there was a lot of stuff going on back then. Mysticism was big back then in the Gilded Age and Victorian Age. You know, a lot of these unusual things were fairly common practice, you know. So, you want to have kind of a thing going in. So, like, go from like right here. Yep, a lot of crazy stuff going on back then. So it doesn't surprise me that the whole Tartaria thing came out of that era. They thought they were the masters of the universe, and you know, that's what they thought, you know. The hubris of the Europeans of that time who thought their shit didn't stink, and you know, if anything, the only thing that they could be, you know, coming from would be something better than them. And that's kind of where the whole Tartaria thing emerged from, if you ask me. You know, like, what could it have been if we didn't make it, you know, that kind of attitude. Very European 19th century attitude. If we didn't make it, who made it? Well, it was some advanced god people, and they left it to us because we were so great, and we're the only people who could understand it. So, and it's sad when you think about it, because the other part of the Tartaria myth, I guess, whatever you want to call it, is the destruction of Tartaria, the destruction of this, you know, so-called, this race of people that were so great at everything, you know, is getting rid of it. And that's one of the things behind the destructions of the World Fair, the destructions of old and ornate buildings all over the world. I mean, if you go look at the timeline, or I'm sorry, the skyline for New York City from 1900, it's completely different. Yeah, there's a couple buildings left that were saved by preservation efforts, but the vast majority of them are gone now. And some really beautiful buildings too, you know, really awesome, ornate buildings. This, you know, like the what was that? The Singer Building. That was a beautiful building. That one's gone. Just a whole bunch of them. A whole bunch of beautiful buildings that were just 86, you know. Because it's weird. It's weird how it works, you know. Part of the stuff I had to take in art college was architecture. There's a lot of art in architecture, you know, obviously. But a big part of it was, you know, how the different styles, like, say, a style from 120 years ago that we like today, well, 50 years after its construction was kind of considered kind of gaudy. So they got rid of it. So they get rid of these buildings that we today think are just so super beautiful and everything. But to them, they were just old eyesores, you know? So that's a big part of it. Interesting stuff. But they end up getting rid of these buildings for whatever, you know, they're eyesores, they're this, they're that. And, yeah, and then that's, you know, after a little bit of time, it's just out of the memory of the people. And then the question of where did we come from is out of the memory of the people. So, doesn't take long. People don't know where they came from and how they got there, or where there is, or, you know, any part of their own history. People just don't know it. And that's sad. Speaking of history, it seems like the whole world's taking a shit right now. It seems like there's always a protest and a riot going on. You know, and there'll be a riot about this particular issue, and then that issue will be resolved, and they'll still keep rioting about it. People just want to go out and destroy shit these days, it seems like. Doesn't matter what it is. They just want to go out and destroy stuff. And it's like, what do you even do about that? About people that want to live like that? There's nothing you can do about it. These people are just mad at the world. They think the world owes them something. Yeah, we'll make these background buildings up way bigger, way more phantasmical looking, you know, futury, like overly futuristic. Just ridiculous almost. Pretty much ridiculous almost. Yeah, like imagine you live in a world with skyscrapers like that, and you look down on this old world like